Welcome to Everybody Pulls the Tarp, the go-to podcast for high performers. I'm Andrew Moses, and each week I talk with Olympians, pro athletes, TV stars, Grammy winners, best-selling authors, CEOs, and other high performers to uncover their success secrets. Every conversation is jam-packed with inspiration and actionable ideas we all can apply to our own lives, personally and professionally. Get ready for a behind-the-scenes look at the techniques, processes, and mindsets powering the world's most successful people. Let's go. This episode is different from any you've ever heard before on this podcast, because today, I won't be the one asking the questions. So let me explain. Last week's episode was the 200th interview I've shared here on the podcast. And to celebrate, this week we're going to do something that many of you have been asking me to do for a while now, to share more of my story, including why I started the podcast, how it all comes together, and some of my favorite takeaways from the now 200 and counting conversations we've had here on Everybody Pulls the Tarp. So this week, my friend and past Everybody Pulls the Tarp guest, Samantha Harris, will be the one asking the questions, and I'll be the guest. Samantha is an Emmy-winning TV personality and journalist, and the former host of Dancing with the Stars. She's also a best-selling author, a certified health coach and trainer, and the host of her own podcast, Your Healthiest Healthy. And as those who follow Samantha's story know, she is also no stranger to tackling life's biggest challenges with determination, positivity, and remarkable resilience. In August, Samantha announced that she has a recurrence of breast cancer. And just as she did following her first breast cancer diagnosis back in 2014, Samantha is once again selflessly navigating her treatment process very publicly in hopes of educating and helping others along the way. She's truly living the everybody pulls the tarp mindset. I thought Samantha would be the perfect person to hand the mic to for this conversation, and I'm so grateful that she agreed to do this. But before we get to my conversation with Samantha, I want to take a moment to share a few quick thank yous. First, to the first 200 guests, thank you. Thank you for sharing your stories with candor and authenticity. You've shared the highs and the lows and everything in between, and we are all better for it. You've been so generous with your time and support, and I'm grateful for the powerful ideas you've shared, and most importantly, I'm grateful for your friendship. I also want to thank my editing team at Sound Advice Strategies and countless others who've lent a hand behind the scenes. You all know who you are. Finally, I want to say thank you to all of you, the listeners, who make up our Everybody Pulls the Tarp family. I am so grateful for your time, support, and enthusiasm, and it's something I never take for granted. There are a lot of things that have surprised me along this journey so far, but perhaps none more so than the fact that over the past nearly 4.5 years, Everybody Pulls the Tarp has been listened to in over 130 countries. For me, it's an important reminder that we are all connected and that the ideas we explore here on Everybody Pulls the Tarp transcend borders, ethnicities, races, and backgrounds, and that we all have the power to become the best version of ourselves and lift others up along the way. My friends, because of you and the community we've built together, we are well on our way to building a world full of tarp pullers. This journey has already far surpassed anything I could have dreamed of, yet in many ways, I feel like it's all still just getting started. Thank you again from the bottom of my heart for joining me for the first 200 interviews, and I can't wait to share the next 200 with you as well. But before we get to that next 200, let's share a little bit of my story with you right now. Samantha, take it away.
Okay, Andrew, this is going to be so much fun because, first of all, I have loved being a guest on Everybody Pulls the Tarp. I love listening to the episodes and what I've been able to learn as a listener. But here's something even more fun. We're flipping the script on you, flipping the microphone as it would be. And I'm going to actually sit in your interviewer chair and ask you a ton of questions because I want to dive into that brain of yours. I want to know not just the behind the scenes Everybody Pulls the Tarp story, how it came to be, what it looks like putting a show on that is really successful and consistent, which we both know in the podcasting world is really hard to do and to achieve, but it is also the necessity to achieve success with a podcast. And you've done that so beautifully. And then at the same time, I want to really dive into some of these incredible conversations you've had, what you've gleaned from them, but even more so, how you've applied them to your life, and just kind of understand a little bit better the inner workings of your own brain in your success. So how does that all sound?
That all sounds great, Samantha. I am so excited that we're getting to do this. Flipping the script, as you put it.
Exactly. And this all kind of came from us having sushi. You were in LA. We grabbed dinner with my husband and we were talking about me just launching my podcast. And I was trying to glean as much as I could from you. And then you're like, well, maybe you should come on mine and interview me. So 4.5 years of you interviewing athletes and Grammy winners and Olympians, best-selling authors, CEOs, really incredible high performers about their secrets to success, their power that they have by leading by example. And I think it's a very unique perspective as a podcast subject matter, and the through line that really has weaved together on your podcast, people really from various walks of life, but all share the success and the fact that they are all pulling the tarp. So we're going to have to just start right there. What the heck does that even mean? Where did the story and the name Everybody Pulls the Tarp come from, Andrew?
Well, Samantha, thank you again for doing this. And many listeners have heard this story, but maybe haven't heard this story in full. So here's the entire story. In 2004, I was interning for a minor league baseball team. It was a summer internship. I aspired to, at that point, to work in sports and wanted to learn the business of sports. Now, I went into that summer internship expecting to spend 99.9% of my time in an office learning the business of sports. And it turns out I was wrong. But instead of just learning the business of sports, I got a powerful lesson in the business of life. It really all boiled down to my first day. So my first day, Samantha, again, I'm going back to this, I'm thinking 99.9% of my work is going to be in an office learning the business of sports. I get up, I put on a pair of nice pants and a polo shirt. I drive to the ballpark. The general manager invites me and my fellow interns into a conference room. And the general manager, he proceeded to ask us all to bring a pair of old clothes the next day that we could keep at the ballpark so that we could help the grounds crew pull the tarp on and off the field when it rained. Now, Samantha, there were so many puzzled looks in that room, including myself. Everybody, again, going back to that point, like everybody had signed up for a front office internship to learn the business of sports.
And yet you're an intern. So therefore interns, it's the peon. You kind of have to do whatever they say and do all the grunge jobs nobody wants. So in some ways, was it not that shocking that they would have a room full of interns to be told, hey, guess what? You're going to be jumping out there with the grounds crew on the inclement weather days and pulling that tarp?
I think in some ways it wasn't entirely shocking. I'd always kind of been raised to, that there's no task beneath you, bring the work ethic mentality, pitch in wherever you can. That's kind of how my parents raised me and how I always operated. But I think what was most puzzling was it was so incongruent with what everybody had expected in terms of the job description for that internship. So, I was thinking of asking like the question that day, isn't that what a grounds crew is for? And fortunately, the general manager must have seen that we were all puzzled. And he went on to explain exactly why we needed to help the grounds crew. And what he explained was, he said, in our big league counterparts, they have the same grass, the same dirt, the same lines on the field, the same paint as we do in the minor leagues. He said, but the big difference is that in the big leagues, they have a much larger budget and in turn, a lot more personnel to do the job. So he said in the minor leagues, he said, we're all going to pitch in. He said, me, the general manager, our CFO, our head of marketing, the head of ticket sales, and all of you interns and everybody in between. We're all going to pitch in. We're all going to do it, whatever we need to do to help the organization be successful. Because in the minor leagues, he said, everybody pulls the tarp. And that's kind of not really where it even ends, Samantha. I pulled the tarp that summer. It's what seemed like a million times. And I did a lot more. So many things that I was not expecting to do. Samantha, I dressed as the mascot. I went to camps. I shot T-shirts through the sunroof of Hummers.
Anna.
I drove players to the airport. I drove their wives to their condominiums. I inflated moon bounces, deflated moon bounces, parked cars. I mean, I cleaned up fireworks debris, Samantha, in center field on a fireworks night when the debris blew into center field and we had a game the next day. I did whatever was asked of me. And just from that point forward, even though I went on to have a career, not necessarily directly in sports, it's kind of been ingrained in me, both personally and professionally, that I want to live my life as now what I call a tarp puller. Somebody who lives the everybody pulls a tarp mindset, who never says that's not my job and just rolls up their sleeves and does whatever it takes to help the team, the community, the organization be successful.
I want to highlight something here. As an intern, again, because I just harken back to my intern days, I kind of remember, right? You just do whatever. You just want to be there. You want to be present. You want to be in the room. You've got a space in the room. You can't say no. You're going to have to do the cleaning up after the fireworks, the pulling the tarp, all the, the driving, the schlepping, the whatever. What I really want to point out here, and I think is extra interesting, well, it's actually twofold. One, you got a world of experience from every part of, I think when I was on the podcast, I talked about being a cog in the wheel of a TV show. Yes, I was the host, but I was a cog in the wheel, and it takes everyone playing equally to make the show a success. Same thing here for the baseball team, the minor league team to be a success. Everyone's got to do lots of different things. You did so many different tasks, but what really stuck out to me is that you mentioned with the tarp pulling, the CEO, the CFO, the GM. To me, listening to your story, Andrew, that's the aha moment where they're not above doing it. So just explore that with me a little bit more. What was that impact, especially as this young, impressionable intern? What was that impact of having these high-level executives do that with you alongside?
There's something really cool about this idea of everyone working together, regardless of your background, years of experience, seniority, salary, title, like all these things. Like there's something really cool about being in the trenches with a group of people and everybody working together. What's even, I think, more fascinating is, like you said, like this idea that you can look at people who are modeling the behavior that they're asking for. Like that is incredibly empowering. That's incredibly powerful. There's so many people, it's easy to ask someone to do something or to have, a mantra on a wall. It's a totally different thing to live it. And what was cool is we lived it. I've since kind of coined, trademarked this everybody pulls the tarp phrase, but we lived the everybody pulls the tarp mindset. And now you can quickly tell when you're in an environment of tarp pullers, because everybody, regardless of their experience, their title, their tenure, they're pitching in, and you can tell that. And I think it's just so empowering.
And it's so empowering that you felt like you were compelled to do something more with this tarp pulling mindset. What led you to actually start the podcast? Because I think there were maybe some other ways that you could have gone, but a podcast is where you decide to funnel all the energy. So what led you to start it?
There's a long, long time in between that internship, obviously, and the podcast kicking off in 2020. The internship was in 2004. So long, long time that a lot of this was marinating in my mind. So what happened over the subsequent years was I built up a really eclectic, interesting network of mentors and friends and colleagues and business associates from a variety of different things that I was involved in. And I consistently found myself reaching out to folks in my network to ask for advice and mentorship and things of that nature. And then the two ideas came together. I began to realize that the people, the leaders, the people that I wanted to model my behavior and seek their mentorship were people that I was seeing as tarp pullers, people who were living that everybody pulls a tarp mindset. And at the same time, I came to this realization that not everybody has access to just a stable of mentors from a variety of different walks of life who've been successful doing different things to reach out to and learn from them and be inspired by them. So I merged these two things. I had this great network. I had this belief that there was a common through line in what all these people that I was learning from were doing. And I felt like really the ultimate tarp pull. Instead of doing this and continuing to do all these conversations in private, the ultimate tarp pull would be to make the conversations available to anybody in the world who wanted to listen to them. So that was really where the idea for the podcast came about. And there's a whole bunch of reasons why I chose podcasting and audio in particular. I was particularly attracted to the idea of audio in an era where there's so much video and there's so much stimulation from different angles. I feel like audio has a very unique intimacy It has a unique way of connecting with people. It's one of the few things today that we can still do like in solitude, right? We can listen on walks, on trails. We can listen on runs. We can listen in the car when we're in traffic, driving by ourselves. I've had people reach out to me. They say, Andrew, I listen to you when I'm going to the bathroom. I listen to you when I'm in the shower. I've listened to you when I breastfeed, right? I mean, like you're talking about people being alone in solitude with their thoughts. And I was particularly interested in that. So that's a little bit about where it kind of came from and also why I selected podcasts and audio in particular.
And I like what you point out too, which is how it is more intimate. And granted, there are plenty of people who I'm sure are watching different videos while sitting doing their business, but there is something really intimate about being the voice in their head in the room while they are doing these very private things that they may not even be doing in front of other loved ones, which I think is a very unique kind of perspective as to why podcasts. So obviously getting something off the ground and then being able to lead it to success has its challenges. So what were some of those early challenges for you?
Trying to do like too many things too fast. There were kind of like two proclamations that I'd kind of made to myself internally when I got going. Really three. One was like, I'm a huge believer in this idea that like you're better off just getting started than kind of being stuck in the analysis paralysis mode.
Right.
That listeners would tell me if it was good or bad. That was my initial, thinking. Like just get started was something that was kind of rattling around my brain.
Get it out there.
And that's how I've been with a lot of different things. I feel fortunate that I have this kind of innate desire and ability to just get something started and kind of see what happens. The second piece was I had committed that I had arbitrarily made a number of 40 episodes. I said, I want to get to 40 episodes before I hire an editor, before I bring any other kind of complexity into this equation. I mean, literally, I'm going to press record. I'm going to record a conversation and I'm going to post it and see what people think of it. Like that was the methodology for episode 1 through 40. Then the third thing, I said to myself, if this becomes anything, and my girls start listening, they're at an age where they start listening, or God forbid, I'm no longer here anymore, and they want to listen to like one of Dad's projects. I want them to hear voices that sound like them, and it was very important to me that, generally speaking, 50% of the guests be successful women. And again, I never like forced the guest on or shoehorn something to meet some metric, but I went back recently and it was, 47, 48% female. And it's something I've been intentional about. So those were kind of the three guiding principles. Just get started, do as much as you can yourself, the first 40 episodes to kind of like figure it out. And then make sure if my daughters listen to it, that they hear voices that sound like theirs. Those were the three guiding principles. But I would say from a challenge perspective, it was trying to not do too much all at once and resist the urge to chase these shiny objects and balance advice and input from people, taking all the input and advice from people, but then also staying true to my core principles and what I wanted to do and what I wanted to produce.
And I think there are so many voices in the podcast world with what one person thinks will work and hit is completely the polar opposite to what someone else says. So it's really, like you said, get it out there, trial and error. And what you really mentioned was it's the audience who are going to tell me if it's working or if it's not and where I can improve. So what feedback did you start to get in those first 40 episodes that made you either pivot or make some adjustments or stay dedicated to where you already started because it was working?
In the early days, what began to kind of give me confidence that it was resonating, one was that the everybody pulls the tarp message, the idea of living that everybody pulls the tarp message was something that was people were understanding and grasping right away. Suddenly, Samantha, I started getting texts and social media messages with people, I now call them tarp finds, where somebody, or a tarp pull in the wild, where somebody sees someone doing something or spots somebody doing something, or they do something and they say, Andrew, I pulled the tarp. They pulled the tarp. My husband pulled the tarp. My daughter's pulling the tarp. So that was the first point of feedback, was the message, the through line, the everybody pulls the tarp idea was resonating. Mm-hmm. It was resonating whether or not you were a baseball fan, had ever even watched a baseball game. It was resonating whether you're a sports fan or not, right? It was transcending all people and backgrounds. And that was particularly cool. The second point of feedback that came in was people were saying, keep following your curiosity. Keep following your curiosity because your conversations feel so natural and organic. And it feels like I'm learning along with you. It doesn't feel like you're asking some preordained kind of list of questions. And I feel like I'm eavesdropping on a conversation that you're having with the guest in a coffee shop. And it's just really, really cool. So I had this idea kind of concurrently of, I was hearing that Everybody Pulls Apart message was resonating. It was super simple to understand. And two, that people were enjoying the format of the conversation. So that was kind of what propelled me. One of the questions that I really wrestled with early on in terms of do I pivot, do I not pivot, was I began to get some feedback from folks that was, were just like, niche down, maybe niche down. You've interviewed so many Olympic athletes. You could have a show of just Olympic athletes. You've interviewed so many talented college and professional coaches. You could have a coach's show. You've interviewed so many authors. You could have but I believed at that point, and I still believe it to this day, that some of the value and the energy in this platform that me and all these guests, you included, have built together is the diversity. The fact that you can learn something from a Grammy winner, an Olympic athlete, an elite coach, a best-selling author, an Instagram influencer, an entrepreneur, a fifth grade teacher. Like there's common through lines through all those stories, and through Everybody Pulls His Heart, we've been able to pull those out. So I've kind of stuck to my guns, but that was a moment where I felt like there was an opportunity to pivot. And I think I would have regretted it, Samantha, if I did.
I mean, you could look, it would always be easy for you to just do sort of a catalog of, okay, here are the coach interviews, here are the athlete interviews, blah, blah, and push those out on their own, but as almost like an offshoot of, or it's the Olympian week and you just drop your 5 favorite Olympian interviews, right? So there's always a place for that, but I think you holding true to what you set out to do, which is it's the through line that connects them all. So there's no need to niche down because you're already in the niche. It's just people aren't, their headspace isn't going to what that niche is unless it sort of explained to them, which is what you did. So was there a point in time when you realized, okay, so you said you knew it hit enough when people were calling you or texting you and saying, I saw someone pull the tarp, or I did this tarp pulling today. Was there anything else that really you feel like was resonating? Maybe lessons that were resonating or aha moments that, because I want to get to your own reflections for you in a bit, but let's still stay on the focus of the audience and what they are getting out of. And what do you feel like are some of the most sort of just impressive or poignant moments where a listener has reached out to you and said, wow, this really hit home, or this was a great moment?
Just to generalize it all, I mean, the feedback I was getting was that people were walking away from the conversations inspired, and they were walking away able to implement the lessons really quickly into their personal and professional life. The conversations were inspiring, and the conversations were also providing an action plan and a roadmap that people could then implement into their lives personally and professionally. I've heard feedback from listeners in terms of how they've improved as a parent, how they've improved as a spouse, how they've used the lessons to improve professionally, get a promotion. I mean, these things, I could be sitting late one night prepping something to send to my editors, and you get a message like that, and it'll fuel me for the next 12 months. Nothing gets me more enthusiastic when somebody can take a little nugget and do something with it.
And that's what's kept you going so consistently, 200 plus episodes in. It is hard to be consistent. The listeners find you and stick with you, and that, by you, I mean any podcaster, when you are consistently dropping. They know every Wednesday they can hear my podcast drop, as long as I'm consistent. So I got to follow your footsteps. They know that on Tuesdays and Thursdays, so-and-so is good, right? So then if you miss, then they find something else to listen to. And then all of a sudden you possibly lost them. You've remained consistent. You haven't missed a single week. How have you done that with such consistency? What's the secret?
First and foremost, I began to feel a great sense of responsibility. I started to release episodes every Thursday at 5 a.m. Eastern time. That was the time that they would hit the podcast apps. And I began to feel this great sense of responsibility that if people were listening and people, time is people's most important commodity, right? I mean, it's their most important thing that we have, the only thing we really can't get back. If people were giving me their time and people were telling me that these stories were giving them the inspiration and giving them these roadmaps to improve their lives personally and professionally, I had a responsibility to hold up my end of the bargain and be consistent. So what I did next was I put systems in place and I created these leading routines that I knew if I went about these routines that I would be able to deliver on my commitment. And one of those things that I started to do probably around episode, 50, 60 was I started to develop this Sunday morning routine. So I would wake up super early before anybody else in my house was awake. And I would write the introduction because what a lot of listeners, this because you've been in media, your whole career and you host a podcast, but I get questions from listeners about the intro. Where do you record the intro? Well, the behind the scenes secret now is I wake up every Sunday morning before anybody else in my house is awake, and I write the intro for the episode 2 weeks away. And then Sunday night, after my kids have gone to bed and the house is relatively quiet again, I record that intro and I share that with my editing team. That Sunday routine has become something that, when I don't do it, I feel it. I feel it in my bones. And it's not just help me systematize everything and make sure that I kind of stick with what I've got. I suddenly began to see that this was a piece of the puzzle for me in the sense that it gave me an opportunity to process these conversations, process the ideas and lessons I was learning. And then I'd be in a better position to articulate to listeners what I think they might be able to take away from it. So that's an example. I mean, there are some crazy, wild, busy spreadsheets that I have that keep this thing organized. And then it's also, I'm a good planner with certain things and not a great planner with other things. This is something I've been able to plan ahead really effectively. I know when I have travel planned or when I have things that are popping up personally and professionally that are going to take me out of my rhythm, how do I adjust? But again, for me, it was creating a non-negotiable appointment with myself. Sunday morning, you wake up, Andrew, and you write an intro for the episode for 2 weeks out. And then Sunday night, you record that intro and you share it with the editing team. And every time I push Samantha on the notes and intro recording that I send to the editors, I feel this sense of combined relief and also enthusiasm. I'm one step closer to sharing this guest's incredible story with the world through the lens and the through lines that we've built on Everybody Pulls the Tarp.
And that consistency, I think, too, as you just mentioned, really can help you to get all your other ducks in a row and allow you to remain consistent in other areas of your life. So how has that then a positive domino effect that when that Sunday schedule is consistent, it has allowed you to do X, Y, and Z with consistency?
If nothing else, what it sets up, it's a forcing function for me to invest in myself from a personal and professional development perspective. Because I know that every single week, I am going to be immersing myself in the stories and wisdom of somebody who's accomplished something, in some type of discipline through extraordinary hard work, overcome extraordinary adversity. And I'm immersing myself in their stories and in the lessons that they've shared. So if nothing else, it serves other people, but it also serves me in such a unique way because I get to learn. I feel so fortunate, that I get to learn from all of these wonderful people who are each special in their own right. So it's cascaded into every aspect of my life. I mean, there is no question, I believe I've become a better spouse, a better parent, a better friend, a better executive, a better everything, healthier. I know that's something that you're passionate about. You're living your healthiest healthy. I think this has kind of put in place building blocks that have helped me live my healthiest healthy in so many different ways.
And as you're giving lessons to so many through your podcast with all the experts and guests you have on, I am now taking a great lesson from what you just said that I think I want to highlight for your listeners, which is, okay, now not everybody is getting a podcast intro at the top of the morning on Sundays, but the lesson I'm taking from it is find something to anchor your week that's consistent to then allow you to have all those other duties and tasks to fall in line with consistency. So thank you for that. I think that's really important. I think that's also a great place to transition to, which is I want to transition into you and your takeaways and some reflections. So let's start with the over 200 stories that you have heard told on your podcast. What have you uncovered that are some of the greatest success secrets that are a common thread?
To me, like the headline is every single one of their stories and every single one of their roadmaps has similarities. That's one of the things that's been so cool. And I think people in general, and this is not to divert us too much here, but like, I think that people sell themselves short when they only talk to people in their own little echo chamber or in their own industry. There's a famous business case study where I believe it was Southwest Airlines was trying to figure out how they could turn planes around faster and be more efficient as an airline. And somebody suggested that they go watch other airlines. And somebody at Southwest said, other airlines are terrible at this. Why would we go watch other airlines and see how we're going to be more efficient? Let's go to a NASCAR pit crew and see how they turn around a vehicle extremely fast and they work together. And I think in many ways, that's kind of what I've tried to create here is this opportunity to learn from different people in different disciplines. So the through line, long-winded way of answering your question, one of the through lines is how common or how similar some of the journeys are in careers and industries and disciplines that on the surface seem so different. The other thing I would say is so many of the successful people that I've talked to have not only navigated adversity, they have figured out how to like reframe the adversity and make it work for them. Like I'll give you a great example. The Hootie and the Blowfish drummer. He told me the story about early in the days of Hootie and the Blowfish. They drove 3.5 hours for a gig and only 2 people showed up. That would bring a lot of people to their knees and make them question whether or not this was going to work. And for people who don't know Hootie and the Blowfish went on to sell over 25 million records, Billboard #1, 2 Grammys, and then obviously, as many know, Darius Rucker has gone on to have an even bigger career as a solo artist. But I said to him, how did you dust yourself off and just continuing onward? And he says, Andrew, he goes, look at it this way. He goes, the bad news, only 2 people showed up to watch Hootie and the Blowfish. The good news was the only people in the world who knew that 2 people showed up to watch us were the 4 of us and the 2 of them. So we just got up the next day, we got in the tour van and we kept going. And I think that's like an illustrative example of this idea of you don't just survive adversity. So many of these individuals I've talked to have used the adversity or reframe the adversity to fuel them onward in such a positive way. So it's not just like a neutral effect, it's a positive effect.
Mm-hmm. And that's something that I know that I've had to work through and live by as well. And everyone is struck down by something. Everyone has a setback. It might be in your career. It might be in a relationship. It might be in a health related area. But whatever the setback is, how you frame it. My husband always likes to tell our kids, you can't control everything. You can control your effort and you can control your reaction to a situation and how your perspective is going to be to attack the situation. And that is the difference between success and failure in so many ways. So thank you for bringing that up. And that Hootie story is a great example of that.
Another common through line is this idea of like a growth mindset. And this phrase growth mindset gets thrown around a lot, but this is one of the big through lines that I've heard in so many of these conversations is no matter how much success these individuals have achieved, either individually or as a team, they always want a little bit more. And most importantly, they always believe they can get a little bit better or they could grow just a little bit. And a great example of that is a former U.S. women's national team soccer legend. Her name is Lindsay Tarpley. And she told me this story. She was in her first national team camp. She was one of the top recruits nationally, when she got recruited to play soccer in college. She's in the national team camp. I mean, she's amongst the best of the best. And the national team coach approaches her and tells her, Lindsay, you are fantastic, but you're not very good at striking a ball from distance or, long distance finishing. She said to me, Andrew, this was a moment where I could have done one of 2 things. I could have said, I'm good enough. Look, I'm in the national team camp. She said, or I could use this as an opportunity to get a little bit better. So they start working with like a medicine ball. Like they get rid of a soccer ball. They bring in a medicine ball. They're showing one of the best players on the earth, one of the best soccer players on the earth, how to position her ankle, how to do this, how to do that, how to strike the ball. Then she begins working every day after practice, first by herself, and then she would step back further and further from the goal and ask like a teammate to stand in as goalie. She says to me, Andrew, she says, we get to the Olympics, and in the gold medal game, I score the first goal, and it's from a long distance. It was the greatest moment of my career, and it never would have happened if I hadn't chosen in that moment to invest in myself. And I think, it's cool the way it all kind of worked out for her and how it changed the course of U.S. women's national team soccer history in a way in the Athens Olympics. But to me, what it represents is that no matter how much you've achieved or how much you've accomplished, like you can always be a little bit better. And that is another one of these common through lines. Another one, Samantha, is this idea that success is incremental. I'll go back to another Olympian. So Michelle Carter, Team USA shot putter. 2008, does not medal. She finishes 13th. Goes back in 2012. She does not medal again, 4th place, like so close. 2016, gold medal. Like she didn't see 13th and 4th as failure. She saw it as progress. And I think that's another thing. I mean, all these people have journeys that are filled with adversity and challenge, and they have this unique ability to reframe the adversity, have a growth mindset, and keep going and believe that success is a journey.
I think when you want something enough and you're passionate about something, that's, I think, where you can even more easily see those incremental, go for it. Let that setback be 2 steps back, but 1 step forward, and continue to pursue it in a forward direction. I know for me, that was absolutely, it didn't matter how many doors closed in my face, I kept going. And I think the true success is, the old saying, it's not the destination, it's the journey, but it's the journey. And then if you get to that destination, well, either you got to find a new passion and a new journey, or you're dead, right? I mean, life just kind of comes to an end. If you get to the destination, there's no more growth, no more yearning, there's no more pursuing, and you're just settling in. So I think one of the biggest fears about people growing old, right, is that I don't have that need to get out of bed every day. So finding what that is to get out of bed every day. And we know, from a health perspective, when you look at the blue zones and in the areas of the world with the longest lived people, they all have a sense of purpose. It's one through line in terms of the pulling the tarp. The one through line for them, living the most people who live to 100 plus, able-bodied, sound of mind, is that they have a sense of purpose. And it sounds like if you are going to be successful and you're going to continue to pull the tarp, you have to have that sense of purpose.
No question. And I think related to that, it's not only a sense of purpose, but it is this, in many ways, this intrinsic internal motivation, almost more than an external motivation. Like in many ways, it seems to me that they want to accomplish something to be able to prove to themselves that they can accomplish it. More so in many, like the medals and the trophies and the Grammys, the Academy Awards and the Emmy Awards, in your case, are almost like a byproduct of success. It's not necessarily what they're motivated for. And that's something I think that is really powerful as well. Another Olympic soccer player, Heather O'Reilly, she had this phrase, I've never been able to, I think about it every day since she shared this with me. She said, Andrew, I spend more of my time trying to prove the people who believed in me that they are right, as opposed to proving the people who doubt me are wrong. And again, that's like just another example of like being motivated by the right reasons and having that sense of purpose.
As we kind of come to the tail end of this, I want to just sort of dive into a little bit more of you, of Andrew, the one who's always asking the questions on Everybody Pulls the Tarp. I can ask you your favorite interview. You've done a lot of wonderful, and by the way, if you guys haven't heard the different sort of recap or the top lessons episodes that aren't the interviews, but they're just the reflections of Andrew on his interviews, please go back and listen to those because they're really awesome. And I could spend the rest of this entire interview right now doing that, but I feel like you've done that. And I want to ask you a few questions because you have an incredible work ethic and this wonderful motivation to keep going. Where does that come from?
I think a lot about my two grandfathers who have passed away, but one grandfather was this marketing executive, incredibly creative, always kind of could come up with a jingle. Like if I was running for student council president, he would have like a good slogan. And then my other grandfather and my grandmother on that side, they are Holocaust survivors. They escaped Nazi Germany. My grandfather, as a teenager, came to this country, lost his mother, his sister, and his father back at concentration camps, came to this country. His wife, eventual wife, came to this country at 6 years old, not knowing a word of English. And, together, the two of them, they built a business, and they did it in a scrappy, entrepreneurial, like blue collar work ethic type of way. And I've always felt like I've had this gift of merging these two different types of disciplines that both my grandfathers had. One grandfather, again, that creativity, and then the idea to communicate an idea, something that sticks, like an idea that stands the test of time. And then again, my other grandfather, just in terms of the work ethic. And I spend a lot of time thinking about them. And I think, I've always kind of lived my life with this belief that I would rather outperform my talents and outperform my intelligence than feel like I fell a little bit short and left something on the table. Samantha, I've never been the smartest person in a room. I've never been the most athletic. I've never been the most gifted, but I always feel like nobody's going to outwork me. And a lot of that I really attribute back to my grandparents' journey from Nazi Germany to the US and building a life and giving all of us on their family tree an opportunity. And I feel this great sense of responsibility to not, in a way, squander an opportunity. Like I want to make the most of my opportunity. And I feel incredibly fortunate and grateful. And that's kind of just how I've always been wired. And I think that's where a lot of it comes from, just realizing that, I have a history, and I have people who came before me, and I have people that I'm trying to make proud, if that makes sense.
Very much. It's a really beautiful sentiment as well, and a wonderful way to honor your grandparents. As you look to share here a little more about your journey, what would be one thing you'd want your listeners to kind of take away from your journey so far?
I think I want listeners to take away that anything is possible, that one little change can have this extraordinary impact. Shay McGee, world famous home designer and host of the Netflix series Dream Home Makeover, Shay McGee, she said to me, Andrew, she said something to this effect. I'm going to kind of paraphrase a little bit. She said, I could shift a lamp just a couple of inches and change the way an entire room looks. I could change someone's entire outlook on life with one item from Target. And that's design, and that's life in general. And I think that's one message I want listeners to take away, is that, like, if you can just come up with one thing that you can take away from one conversation and put it to work that day or the next day, it has the potential to make your life a little bit better, a little bit happier, a little bit more productive, and provide you a little bit more fulfillment. I think that's just such an important idea.
Andrew Moses, everybody pulls the tarp. You are amazing. I love that you allowed me the honor of all the guests that you've had to sit here and be in the interview chair to chat with you and really get to know your process, your takeaways. And I look forward to the next 200 plus episodes of Everybody Pulls the Tarp.
Well, I'm grateful for you doing this, because it guarantees one thing. It guarantees that this might be the second episode my wonderful aunt is going to listen to, because she's a big fan of everything I do. But I know for a fact she listened to the conversation I had with you, because she is one of your biggest fans. And it all started from your Dancing with the Stars days and entertainment news show work. So I know that my aunt is going to tune into this one, and that makes me incredibly grateful. And I hope so many others around the world do as well. I'm so grateful that we got an opportunity to do this.
What's your aunt's name?
Aunt Evelyn.
Aunt Evelyn. Aunt Evelyn, thank you for listening. We've got a great one here in Andrew, but you already know that. One of these days we'll have to meet. Thanks so much, Andrew.
Thank you, Samantha.
Thank you for joining me this week. Be sure to subscribe in your favorite podcast app so you can catch all of our upcoming episodes. And if you are like me and want a world full of tarp pullers, then leave a review to help others find us. You can also follow me on Twitter at Andrew H. Moses. That's Andrew H. Moses. And be sure to sign up for my email newsletter at everybodypullsthetarp.com/newsletter. I'll share tips and insights to help you achieve maximum success and happiness. Today's a great day to pull the tarp. I am rooting for you. See you next time.